o'clock.
There, 7 o'clock.
Yeah, my clock.
Yeah, I
My
hear
clock is chiming
coming.
7, yeah.
Yeah.
All righty, well, welcome everybody to the first meeting of 2022. And unfortunately, because of COVID, we are virtual again for our January meeting. And I know we were all looking forward to having Jennifer Harvey with us for this one. She's always a lively performer. We have Marianne Van Berlo has agreed to switch, and so we're hoping Jennifer's okay for April, and we're hoping we'll be okay in April as well with the COVID situation. As a matter of fact, I think we might be okay for the February meeting, but we'll know more probably by the end of this month, and we'll keep you posted as to whether we'll be virtual or live when it comes to the February meeting. All righty, we've got several things on the agenda. We'll talk about those afterward. Why don't we get to our guest speaker right off the bat? Gwen, are you doing the introductions?
Yes, I am, Bruce. Thank you. We would like to welcome Marianne Van Berlo. She is a volunteer master gardener with Ottawa, and she's been a member of the Brockville and District Horticultural Society since 2014. Marianne wears many hats and is serving as a board member, sits on several committees, recently passed on her role as treasurer, and she's also been our tech person. She's the expert that oversees our Zoom meetings and is going to continue in that role, hopefully for not long. Hopefully we can get to meet in person. Marianne has a 2.4 acre garden on the Thousand Islands, on the St. Lawrence, and it's part of the Thousand Islands and Rideau Canal Garden Tour. Since it opened, Marianne has welcomed many bus tours to her beautiful Maitland property. In 2017, her gardens were featured in the Ontario Gardeners magazine. Marianne has a wealth of knowledge and to share with us. And tonight's topic is what's in a name, why we use botanical names, and we're going to look at some of the more interesting ones. So I'll hand it over to Marianne.
Okay, just give me 2 seconds here. Okay, I clicked too many times. There we go. And I think we're all good. So thank you, everyone. The bio is just a little out of date. I resigned from the board in November, so I'm not an active board member anymore, but I'm still around and helping out as much as I can. I will ask that all of you mute your microphones so that we don't get background noise, because you also steal the camera when you when we hear you speaking in the background, or if your phone rings or whatever. So if you could just mute your microphones, that would be great. So let's get right into it. What's in a name and why do we use them? Botanical names. Well, if you look at botanical versus common names, the botanical names are definitely more accurate, and there's so much less chance of confusion because they're international. I know they're Latin, and I know some people roll their eyes when they hear people using Latin names. It's not meant to be a snobbery thing. It's really just meant for accuracy. Botanical names usually very descriptive, and it gives hints to the origins of the plant. And the one downside to botanical names is, as science advances, they often, well, seems that it's often nowadays, reclassify things. And that's due to the advent of DNA. They're finding out that some of their early classifications were incorrect. Now, common names are definitely easier to remember. They're more colorful. It's easier to remember mother-in-law's tongue versus Dracaena trifasciata. There's folklore involved in common names, but there's also some folklore in botanical names. But like forget-me-nots, there's these, folklore involved in that is that young lovers were by the stream and the gentleman bent down to pick some flowers for his sweetheart, but fell into the river and was carried away by the stream and he threw the flowers back at her before he went under and said, "Forget me not." And common names, there's also the familiar. My mom could never remember the name marigolds, so she called them stinkertjes, which just means little stink pots in Dutch. So I will always know marigolds as stinkertjes. There's regional variations with common names. So in the East Coast, the same name could be used for a different plant. So if someone comes asking you for a bluebell, it might mean something different to you than it means to them. And there's so much room for error and misinterpretation when you use a common name. For instance, if you Google oxeye daisy, you'll get all these different forms of daisy. Some are the wild daisy, some are the hybridized daisy, some are the yellow oxeye, there's just some that even looks like a chamomile down here, just by the foliage. So there's so many different daisies that it's better to use the botanical name because then you're sure of what you're getting. Same goes for geranium. We use the term geranium when the true geranium is the perennial form, which is these two pictures, and all of these other ones are annual geraniums. So they're totally different plants. They're not even in the same family. Another search, snow in the mountain. That's another common one that is misinterpreted. There's two plants pictured here. One is the euphorbia, and the other one is the common goutweed, the agapodium, which is, no one wants that. The euphorbia can self-seed quite a bit, but it's still a nice plant and quite manageable. If someone gives you goutweed when you ask for snow on the mountain, you will be sadly disappointed. So why do we use botanical names? Well, as the three previous screens showed us, it's the only way you can be absolutely sure of what you're getting. And quite often nurseries will display their plants in alphabetical order by botanical name. And I used the example of bluebells. Well, that's one that is really confusing because there's so many flowers that are blue in the shape of bells. And a friend of mine who runs a garden center said this is one of the most common points of confusion for her when someone comes in and says they want bluebells, because these are some of the different plants that have bluebells in their names. English bluebells, Spanish bluebells, Virginia bluebells, tall bluebells. So I don't need to read all of these off to you, but you can see how many different plants you might end up with if you just say, I want some bluebells. And I'm sure as soon as I said the word bluebells, each of you had, a particular plant in mind, and it may not even be one of the ones that you see here. So way back in the 1700s, Carl Linnaeus, Swedish botanist, very early ecologist scientist, came up with the idea of binomial nomenclature, and that's just a two naming system. So he wrote this book, Systema Naturae, to describe all living things. Well, he didn't quite have it right because he had animals, vegetables, and minerals included in this. Of course, we know minerals aren't alive. So there have been revisions to this over the years. But you've got to remember, they were not working with strong microscopes. They were doing a lot of this with the bare eye and classifying all life forms into, this little schematic that you see here. Domain has been recently added to the schematic, and it is still in dispute. And then we go down through the kingdoms and, of course, order, family, and genus. Anything that ends in Alice or Alice is usually in the order, and family names end in ACA. So that's usually how you can tell the different names. Now, within the domain, there's eukaryota and prokaryota, and I just want to quickly try and explain those. Eukaryota are just plants, items, life forms, that's what I'm trying to say, with a cell with a nucleus versus the prokaryota, which are unicell life forms. So they're live, but they don't have a nucleus. So that's the only difference there. And that's what I meant when I said domain. And that's a new level of classification that's still in dispute. But we are really only going to be looking at genus and species and family today to try and keep it simple. And let's look at where the moss rose fits into all of this. So if you look down here, the moss rose, well, that's the species. And it falls under the genus Rosa, family Rosaceae. And in that family, this is an older chart, so this number's out of date, but you can see even back here, it was up to 3,500 species. And fruit, apples, hawthorn, there's so many things that fall into this class that you wouldn't say are related to roses. But if you look at their characteristics closely, and the flowers, the reproductive system is one of the things that the botanists look at, you will see that they're very similar. So in the rose family, and it's only considered a medium-sized family with, and this is the current stats. Remember I said the previous slide was out of date. Current stats, and of course they change all the time too. 4,828 species, 91 genera. And in this family, there's herbs, shrubs, trees, and they range around the world. And some of these species that you may not realize are related to roses or in the same family as roses are acamilla, or lady's mantle, the mountain ash tree, hawthorn tree, cotoneaster or rock space shrub, even your raspberry and blackberry. Again, looking at those little flowers, they do look like a rose. And all the things in the prunus family, plums, cherries, peaches, apricots, they're all related to roses. So how do they decide what family a plant belongs to? Well, they look at all kinds of things. They look at whether it has a vascular system. So how does water flow up and down? Does it flower? Does it not flower? How many leaves does it have when the seed first comes out? Is it a monocot or a dicot? All of those things tell us what kind of plant it is and what family they would classify it in. Now, you can use that same data to work backwards. There are keys. This is a large book. It's about 1,100 pages. It's the Manual of Cultivated Plants, and it was originally published in 1924. So again, this data about roses is out of date, but you work backwards with this one. So you look at the characteristics that you've got in front of you to try and determine what family it belongs to. So you look at if the flower parts have ovaries or not. Are the ovaries superior? So if it's got a fruiting ovary, it's not a pome. So all of these things will tell you how to classify the plant or what plant you've got. And of course, they do keep track of all this. There is a international organization that takes care of all this, and they do, it's very serious business. If you want to name a plant, you have to prove that it's a new plant. You have to do all the research and get other scientists to back you. And it's this book gets revised every maybe 7 to 10 years. It's not done annually, but it's all in a database. So remember I said our friend Carl Linnaeus instituted the binomial nomenclature system. So what that means is it's two names together to make one name for a plant or anything in the kingdom or anything with life. So we have the genus and a specific epithet, and that is basically a descriptive word. So the two of those together are your species. You never just say a species name on its own. You have to say the genus with it or else no one knows what you're talking about, because you can say, I don't know what I'm going to say, but it's the equivalent of saying man belongs to the genus Homo, and under the genus Homo, we belong to the species sapiens. So we're Homo sapiens. You would never just say sapiens. It's always Homo sapiens. And so if we look at something like geraniums, we have Geranium pratense, Macrorhizum, Cinerarium, Himalayans. If I just said Cinerarium to you, you wouldn't know what plant I was talking about. I have to say Geranium Cinerarium, and that way you know exactly what I'm talking about. And there is a format for writing these up, and it's generally that you say the genus and specific epithet followed by a cultivar name, if there is one, in single quotes. And the specific epithets will always match the gender of the genus. So believe it or not, yes, they're all Latin. So gender comes into play. So if the genus is determined to be masculine, then you would use the masculine specific epithet. So the example down here I have is lutea, which means yellow. So the feminine would be lutea, male would be masculine, would be luteus, and neutral or neuter would be luteum. And then there is some extra information that you can find in the names. So if you see an X in the name, that just means it's a cross between two different species. So they do this all the time. If there's two existing species, they try and see what would we get if we cross them, and that's how we get new plants. Sometimes you'll see subspecies or SSP in a name, and that just means it's this, within a group of plants, there's another small subgroup that looks definitely different. It may have evolved in a different geographic region, so the difference is noted just by calling it a subspecies of the bigger species. And sometimes you have a variety, and that's a naturally occurring variation from the main species. And forma, it just means it has minor difference to the species. So, and lately you've been seeing plants that are trademarked or registered. And again, this is the hybridizers trying to distinguish their plants and cut down on some of the, I don't want to call it bootlegging, but home propagation that we all do. By trademarking it, you're technically not supposed to do that, not supposed to bring them to the plant sale, or at least not sell them under the official trademark name. So when you have a trademark plant, you always include the full name and the trademark or the registration mark. And they're just adjectives that get added either to the botanical name or to the common name. Now, when you're looking up plants in Wikipedia, they're really good about giving you the whole lineage right back up to plant kingdom. But let's look at these little prickly pear cactus here. So you can see they're Opuntia, and rather than repeat the name, if you're going to do a paragraph or something and the name repeats, you just put, the first time you put Opuntia fragilis, and the second time you would just put O period fragilis. And the information here under the binomial name just indicates what plant explorer first named it. So if we look at the prickly pear, the common names for this one is the brittle prickly pear or the little prickly pear. And where does its botanical name come from? Opuntia fragilis. Well, Opuntia, a botanist named it Opuntia because a similar plant grew in the town where he was from, which is called Opus, Greece. So Opuntia from Opus. And this one is very brittle or fragile, and the pads break off very easily from the old growth. The new growth breaks off very easily. So that's why it's called brittle or brittle prickly pear, little prickly pear, but it's right there in the botanical name. Opuntia fragilis tells you that it's the brittle prickly pear. Another cactus, and this is also a hardy cactus. The previous one was, and this one and the next one, they're all hardy cactus that we can grow in this area. So this one's Humifusa, Opuntia humifusa. Again, Opuntia, same origins, but Humifusa means sprawling on the ground and procumbent. So when you look at this large clump, you can see, yeah, they're not that upright. They're kind of spreading and sprawling on the ground, which is, gives you a bit more description than some of the common names, which Indian fig, eastern prickly pear, devil's tongue. So, and this is another prickly pear cactus, the polycantha, and that just means many thorns. And again, very descriptive because you can just see how many spines are on these cactus. And I'm sure that's where the name, some of their common names come from. Starvation prickly pear, because you'd probably starve before you'd want to try and peel that thing. And remember, I said specific epithets were adjectives. So they are just descriptive words that are part of the name, and they can be an indicator of color. I'm not going to read all these. And these are not all of them even. There's many more. These are the ones I could find reasonably quickly. Yellow, red, and blue. And I've shown the feminine, masculine, and neutered. White, black, silver, gray, all of these. So anytime you see a plant that says Argentea, obviously it's got silver foliage. Fumosa, think of fumitory or fumes, so smoke color. So they all kind of make sense. And again, Grisia, so think of your French, gris. So there you go. A lot of these words are rooted in other words that you're very used to. The colors, pink, purple, and green. Again, many different ways of expressing them. Under the greens, Olivacea, so obviously olives, Purpureum, Violacea, Carnata means flesh. So think of other words that sound similar, like carnal, bodily desires, flesh, weakness of the flesh. So all of these kind of, if you start thinking about other words that are similar, you can get an idea of what they actually mean. And let's just look at some of the other specific epithets and what they can describe. And these, again, are just a few choices that I thought just, illustrated very well. So leaf shape is one that's commonly described. So angustifolia means narrow leaves. And if you look at this echinacea, you can see how narrow the leaves are. Lanceolata, lance-shaped. Again, like, lance of the Knights of the Round Table days. Macrophylla, big leaf. And there's your big leaf hydrangea. Pinifolius, pine-like leaves. And there's a penstemon with very fine needles. It can describe scent. We can have the skunk cabbage, Symplocarpus fetidus. Well, fetidus means smelly, unpleasant, smells like a goat. So think of fetid, anything that's fetid, you don't really like the smell. Fetid cheese, goat cheese. You can see how it all makes sense together. Fragrantissima means scented. Odorata means perfumed. And suaviolens means sweet smelling. So knowing these things, when you're staring at choices of plants, they give you an idea of what the plant what might be in store for you with this plant. Again, some of the characteristics it can describe: large flowered, grandiflora, giganteum, large or giant. Macrorhizum just means macrorhizum, so large root. And spicata, Veronica spicata, here's an example, and you can see how spiky this is, so spike-shaped flowers. More characteristics that can be described by this specific epithet. The cernum means nodding, and there's a picture of the nodding trillium here. I missed that. Ocuparia, bird catching. So that's an interesting one. Dentata, toothed, and there's a leaf of the castanea is chestnut. So, and glabra means smooth. Glutinosus, sticky or glutinous. Spectabile, that's one we associate with sedum or spectabilis or dicentra, bleeding heart. But here's a orchid that's spectabile or spectacular and showy. Tomentosum, hairy or downy. Venosa, is veiny, and viscosa is sticky. So this salvia, I have a yellow sticky salvia, and believe me, it is sticky. I know every time I pull a seedling out of that one. Their growth habit can be described. Columnaris just means columnar. So you can see these fruit trees are very columnar. Fruticosa, bushy. Gracilis means slender. Nana is a common one. So that just means dwarf. So anytime you see Nana in a name, you know it's going to be a dwarf cultivar. Just remember, dwarf is a relative form though, because if you get a dwarf pine, if the plant is normally 50 feet tall, the dwarf might grow to 30 feet tall. So don't think it's going to, be a 3-foot tall plant in your garden. Dwarf is relative. Prostrata means prostrate, not prostate, prostrate. So flat, lying on the ground hugging. Reptans means creeping. Scandens means climbing. So again, all good descriptions. So if you're looking for low growing plants, you might look for nana or something reptans, creeping or prostrate. So all good descriptors. And many times plants have been named after botanists or plant explorers. And just some quick examples: Forsythia, named after William Forsyth. Kniphofia, or red hot poker, named after Johann Hieronymus Kniphoffe. And Magnolia, named after Pierre Magnol. And sometimes the specific epithet is also named after plant explorers. So we've got Viburnum sargentii, and they add the 2 double I's, and they're both pronounced. So sargentii, named after Charles Sargent. Buddleia davidii, after Père David. Magnolia fraseri, John Fraser. And Aechmea, fosteriana, named after Mulford Bateman Foster. So, the plants all have names for a reason. Sometimes it can describe their use. Odoratissima has often been used in the perfume industry. Officinalis is a common one behind herbs. And that just means it was an apothecary plant. So used by the early alchemists for healing. And tinctoria means dyeing. And elastica means stretchy or elastic. So your rubber plant in this picture, obviously well named. And you'll often see soapwort, spiderwort, and the name wort is, and those are common names, but I just thought I'd throw this in here because you wonder where that comes from. Well, wort or wirt is just Old English name for plant. So it's just a soap plant or a spider plant, Tradescantia. So that's all that means. And it can also tell you their origins. So Cambricum means Welsh, Canadense means from Canada, Chinensis from China, Japonica from Japan, Nipponica from Nippon or Japan, Sibericum, Siberia, Occidentalis, and it means west, and in this case it means America, because we're talking about the pine here, not the pine, that's a cedar. Orientalis is Asia, from Asia. And there's a lot more. These are just a quick example of some of them. We can also get an idea of habitat. Where does this plant want to grow? Alpina means alpine. So obviously, limestone outcroppings is a good spot to grow any alpine plants. Maritima means coastal. Campestris means field. Montana means mountain. Pratensis means meadow. So, field or meadow growing geranium here. Riparius grows on a riverbank. And Sylvestris means forest. So that gives you an idea of the origins of these plants and the conditions they like to grow in. Can also tell you about bloom time. The autumn crocus, autumnal meaning autumn. Serotinus, late blooming. Vernus, springtime blooming, as this is a little sweet pea. And Vespertinus, meaning late evening. So if you're fans of murder mysteries and you see the monks get killed during Vespers, that's their evening prayer. So just means evening. And the root of their name can often tell you a lot also, or has origins and similarities between plants. So Calla is the Greek word for beautiful. So you get calycanthus, meaning having beautiful flowers. Callicarpus, beautiful fruit. Callistaceus, having beautiful spikes. Calizonis, having beautiful zones or bands in color around the plant. Hemerocallis, daylilies. Hemero means day and callus means beauty, so beauty for a day. Duris, again, means hard, so durabilis means durable or lasting. Duracinus, producing hard fruit or berries. Durusciflus, somewhat hard or rough. And now let's look at some of the fun names, because I think botanists have a twisted sense of humor. Over the years, some of them have given some very interesting names. So this is Onoportum acanthus, and onoportum comes from the Greek for donkey fart. So this, apparently the donkeys will eat this, and the end result of them eating it is both quite audible, loud, and malodorous. Amorphophallus, titanum. Titanarum would be the common name. And it literally means giant misshapen penis. And that's the name it first went by, penis plant or corpse flower, because it does smell like rotting flesh. And it is pollinated by flies. And this is the one that you'll often see featured because it only blooms every 7 or 10 years. And it's quite a big thing in the tropical greenhouses when it does bloom. I mean, it stinks up the whole place, but it's still spectacular to look at. I mean, that's taller than probably a 5 foot or 6 foot person standing beside it. And this grows in our area. This is one you find in your own garden. At least I find it all the time in mine. Phallus and puticus, and it's the common stinkhorn mushroom. It's definitely not its plant, it's a mushroom, but I just thought it was just a great name because it translates to shameless penis. And the orchid, this is Orchis mascula. It's the first orchid that was ever studied, and way back in the time of Greek, the Greeks were studying plants. And you can see the tubers at the bottom, a pair of rounded underground tubers. So it literally means balls. So when you're saying orchid, you're really just saying balls. This one is, I'm not even going to pronounce the Latin name on this one or the cultivar name. Let's just go with the common name on this one. And that's a good point. There is no right or wrong way to say these names, so don't be embarrassed if you can't pronounce them. And I'm sure I've flubbed a few of them. But you know, people will appreciate your trying and get the idea of what you're talking about, and you'll still have a better chance of getting the plant that you want even if you butcher the name. So the common name on this one is boob cactus or titty cactus, and as you can see, it does kind of resemble that. And this one was named by Carl Linnaeus himself, father of taxonomy. And I guess he was a dirty little old man because he named this one Clitoria ternatea. It's a butterfly pea, and it's quite a distinct flower shape. And just you have to wonder how the name got through the censors back in the 18th century. The Lobelia syphilitica, there you go. Not named because the plant gives you syphilis, but because it was actually used to treat syphilis way back.
Mm.
The ilex is the holly plant, so Ilex vomitoria, and it's a poisonous plant, which of course is what would cause the vomiting if you try to eat it. And it's actually a very common plant in the zones where you can grow it. It's not hardy here, but despite its name, it's a very popular plant, probably because of those pretty holly berries. Echinops retro or globe thistle, and it just comes from the Greek, literally meaning hedgehog. So you can see how it gets its name, and ox meaning appearance, so it looks like a hedgehog. Spigelia genuflexa literally means named after the fact that it bends down to plant its own seeds. So there you can see the flower in its upright form. But when it's ready to drop its seeds, it actually bends down, so it genuflects and lays its own seed. And more recently named plants are getting more and more interesting. This one is named Begonia Darth Vaderiana, so named after Darth Vader. It's a very dark, almost black leafed orchid, begonia, sorry. And it's found on an island, Borneo. And it doesn't get a lot of light, which is probably the reason that it's so dark on the forest floor. The foliage is so dark, not a lot of green pigment in there. Dracula smog. Well, this one is named after the dragon in The Hobbit, Smog the dragon. So Dracula actually translates to little dragon, and it's Smog, which is another dragon. So it's therefore a double dragon. And it was discovered deep in the cloud forest of Ecuador in 2013. And Stelis Oscar Grouchii. I guess you don't need me to explain that one to you. Kind of does look like Oscar the Grouch, though.
Mm-hmm.
And Ptericus erigogiana. And if you're a Harry Potter fan, you know the giant venomous spider Aragog. Then that's who this name is. This plant is named for. It's not exactly a pretty plant. It's not one I want to add to my collection, but just nevertheless, the name is interesting. And they're still naming plants after, now they're getting named after stars, which is very interesting. But Lady Gaga has a whole genus named after her, 19 species of ferns in this genus. And 2 of them are newly described, Gaga germinata and Gaga monstriparva. Now, germinata is her family name because she was born Stephanie Germanata, so Lady Gaga. So, and then the other one is monstriparva, is named after, it actually calls her fans Little Monsters. And they're named after her because of the gametophyte, which is said to resemble the outfit she wore to the 2010 Grammy Awards. And it does kind of resemble it. And one that's already just been named this year is a tree in the Igbo forest in Cameroon. And it's a very endangered plant. And this is a very sensitive area. And he Leonard DiCaprio, got involved, and I guess part of the benefit of fame is that people listen to you. He was able to protect this conservation area, and because it was under the threat of logging. So this new species of plant was named after him. And this is related to the ylang ylang tree. So if you've ever smelt ylang ylang, you know how beautifully fragrant it is. So I imagine this one is similar. And this is the common milk thistle. And it's just a fun one to say because it's Silybum marianum. And the name derives from the Greek silybon or silybos, meaning tassel or tuft. And so you can see the tassel or tuft. And marianum comes from Latin, refers to the legend that the white spots on the leaves came from the milk of the Virgin Mary, nursing her child whilst fleeing to Egypt. So interesting origins in the name, but just fun to say too. And remember our friend Carl Linnaeus, who's, you know, the father of taxonomy. Well, he has a plant named after him. This was one of his favorite plants, and it's the twin flower. And it's a plant that we can grow here. It's a good ground cover plant, delicate little flowers on it, always two on the end of a stem. And it was named after his friend and teacher. So named after him by his friend or teacher. And when we look back at how they did the naming of these plants, and as I said earlier, they did a lot of it just with a looking glass or mediocre quality microscopes, bare eye, and they got a lot of it right. So they did really well. They were just looking at the leaves, how it grew, the stem, the flower, the root, reproductive parts. But now we have DNA testing. So we are, blessed or cursed, I don't know how you want to look at it, with the reclassification. So that is the one downside to things. We think we get to know a plant, we learn that complicated name, and then they change it on us. And some of the recent changes that I can think of, we used to know Cimicifuga or snake root as Cimicifuga, now it's Actea. Bleeding heart, we always knew it by Dicentrus spectabilis, now it's Lamprocapnos. Coquitziais, now Linnaei, so in the same family as that previous one that I showed you from Linnaeus. Mahonia, the grape or Oregon grape, is now Berberis. So this, and the common daisy that one, the white daisy, the big daisy, it's been a chrysanthemum for years, and now it's a leucanthemum. So they do try and do this to us, but we just have to get used to it, because the use of botanical names really does make more sense in that you will get the right plant. It's international. It crosses all languages and boundaries because it's based in Latin. So it doesn't matter if you're in Europe or in South America, the botanical name is the botanical name. So now, hopefully, I've given you some of the reasons why we try and do this, and maybe you'll give it a try. This is a little book that I've got. I got it at Lee Valley many years ago, and it's quite a handy little guide. It gives you the Latin names, and there's lots of neat little stories in it. It's just a little small book, but lots of good information. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And of course, they don't have to be just on plant names, so we can talk about gardening in general. And let me stop sharing so we can see each other's faces.
Mm-hmm. Is it possible to get a copy of your PDF or PowerPoint, whatever?
I can, put it in our Google Drive and give you the link to pick it up there or to look at it there. Sure.
Because that was a fantastic presentation, but there's no way I'm going to remember it.
No, there's no quiz. You don't have to remember it.
Marianne, have you ever discovered a plant and tried to name it?
No, I have not. But yeah, that is an interesting point because yeah, if you see something in your garden and you're going, wow, that's different than all the other plants I've ever seen of that type, try and keep it separate and propagate it and see if that mutation is stable, because sometimes it's just a mutant and it's not a stable mutation. But if it is, perhaps it's not a mutation, perhaps it's a new hybrid or a cross between two other plants. So definitely that would be really neat. And yes, if you find it, if you discover it, or if you breed it, then you get naming rights.
Okay. Any other questions?
Is there a way to tell if a plant is edible by its name?
No, not always. I mean, when you see something like vomitoria, it's probably not good to eat, but no, not always, definitely not.
Other questions?
I really enjoyed your presentation, Marianne.
Lorraine?
Very good. Very interesting.
Yes.
Marianne, thank you. Gwen?
Yes, on behalf of everyone, Marianne, we'd like to thank you so much for this most interesting topic and that you got through all the tongue twisters very well. It was very interesting. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Marianne, I'll just comment if I may. I've sat here with my phone photographing every screen, but it'd be an awful lot better quality if we can get a copy of the presentation.
Yeah, not a problem.
That was great. All right, if we want to quickly look at some of the other things that we need to talk about tonight. Membership renewal. And I know it's tough, but if you can do it online, Trish, can you comment on membership renewal?
Sure. Actually, quite a few people are starting to send questions about how much does it cost and how to get money in. And what I'm going to do, I'm hoping we have an in-person meeting in February. But what I'm doing right now is if people want their books and their cards, they can pick them up at my house. And I just put them in a bag on my door handle, so everything's COVID friendly and all that. But I am getting quite a few queries already.
Excellent. I'm hoping as well that we will be live in February. So
Oh, I really do hope so.
with fingers crossed for that.
Yes, definitely. So
All right.
we are we've also gone to a multi-year form. And so what I'm doing is I'm just asking people, has any information changed? And if not, we're just keeping the form from last year.
Okay. CD Saturday is March the 5th. And again, this year, like last year, it is not going to be at the Memorial Center. It's going to be hosted out of the Brockville Library. Now, is Suzanne with us tonight? She would probably not. Okay, she's going to try to do something, but she's asking you if you could drop off your seeds in her mailbox at 833 Cunningham Crescent before Valentine's Day, so February 14th, with as much information as possible about its contents, along with your name and phone number, and she'll assure delivery to the library in labeled packages. Or you can just drop your seeds off at the library as well. Any comments, or is everyone okay with that? Okay. Plant Red. This is the year of the garden. And I have sent a letter off to Brockville City Council to get them to declare it the year of the garden. And the other thing that we'd like to do during the year of the garden is to encourage everybody, including the city, and I've included this in the city, to ask everyone to plant red. So gardens featuring red. Flowers, fruits, shrubs, vegetables, just plant the seeds, and whatever open space you have, make sure there's room for a red plant. And this is a great way to celebrate Canada and to celebrate the year of the garden. And one final note, each year we donate money to the Rideau St. Lawrence Science Fair. We did a thank you note back from the organizers of the Science Fair to say thank you for the donation. And our treasurer is going to send the check off to them again this year for $350 to support the young scientists in our area, and hopefully some botanists as well in our area that would benefit from that. Now, does anybody have any other business for this meeting today?
No.
Well, thank you to those that joined us online. We will keep you posted and hopefully be back and joining us live in February. And again, we'll keep you posted on that. And again, Marianne, thank you so much for tonight, and have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you.